Hi everybody, it is Riley with Riley Humane and welcome to my second ever YouTube video. My first video received so much support and I got a lot of helpful advice that I'm hoping will help me improve this channel moving forward. I wanted to let you know that I have created a Discord server for those interested in animal true crime to chat with me on. I'd love to use that platform to chat about cases and hopefully receive some case suggestions if there are any stories that you would like to hear on this channel. I am also on TikTok where I will be sharing bite-sized videos from these long-form videos and hopefully talking about cases over there as well. I really feel like community growing here and I want to nurture that as much as possible because I enjoy telling these stories to you and telling you what we can do to protect animals and pets. So, all of that being said, let's get into today's case. Just like last week's, this video will cover some sensitive topics in relation to animal abuse and neglect. Severe discretion is advised. Today I'm going to tell you about the Queen's animal hoarder, also known as Elizabeth Grant. According to Elizabeth's Facebook page, she grew up in a loving family with her mother, a father, and a brother. Elizabeth Grant graduated from Pace University where she received a Master's of Science in Administration and Supervision, and it appears that she was a school teacher for several years. Elizabeth has no children and never married. Elizabeth appears to have had a pretty fantastic relationship with both parents, but she did have a rocky relationship with her brother. Again, in this case, I'm not going to mention the names of her family members because that is ultimately irrelevant to the crime. Elizabeth committed these actions. These crimes belong to her alone. At the time the first crime was committed by Elizabeth, she, her mother, and elderly father all resided together in a home in Queens, New York. On January 6th of 2016, a police officer decided to stop by their home to check in on Elizabeth's mother, who had been an elderly crime victim. When this officer arrived to the home, he knocked on the doors, but nobody answered. However, one of the doors to the home was left open, and the officer was able to take a peek inside, and he saw nothing short of deplorable conditions. This officer saw several animals living in complete filth. Also, I want to be clear, as I talk about how filthy this home was, remember that there are two elderly persons and Elizabeth living in the home as well. Even if you don't care for the animal victims, remember that Elizabeth was the caretaker of both of her parents and she allowed the home to become what this officer called as deplorable. So not only were the animals a victim, both of these elderly persons were, as they were forced to live in a disgusting home. Plus, Elizabeth's mom was already a victim of an elderly crime, so I can't imagine how hard those conditions were on her as an elderly person. Several weeks later, on January 28th, officers returned to the home alongside ASPCA to find animals living in the same filthy conditions as described as that first officer. They observed cats and dogs with missing eyes, patches of missing and matted fur, and various signs of malnutrition. On that same day, they were able to obtain a search warrant and rescued 67 animals that were in various stages of suffering from the property. The authorities noted that the animals were suffering from a variety of illnesses, including dental diseases, respiratory infections, and ear mites. Only 2 of the 55 cats that were removed from the property were in actual good health. As far as the property itself goes, filth doesn't even seem like a strong enough word to describe it, as the home and the furniture were covered in feces, urine, and fur. The smell of ammonia was so strong in the home that those going in to remove the animals had to wear respirators and protective gear. When all was said and done, the ASPCA reported that they rescued 55 cats, 12 dogs, and 2 turtles. Most of the animals rescued from Elizabeth's home were able to be brought back to health and adopted into new homes, but 12 of these animals had to be euthanized due to poor health or behavioral issues. If you ask me, Elizabeth kind of made out like a bandit. Actually, not kind of. She definitely made out like a bandit because she only had to serve 1 year in jail, and that was served while she was awaiting trial. She was also banned from having pets for 10 years and had to spend 3 years on parole. One of the terms of her probation included random home visits. The judge who handled Elizabeth's case stated that the best word to describe Elizabeth was delusional, as even with obvious proof of neglect in this case, Elizabeth still did not believe that she harmed the animals in her care and continues to maintain that she was a good owner to this day. Now, while that crime was committed back in 2016, Elizabeth's sentencing was not until early 2018. And very shortly after that sentencing, on August 29th of 2018, a parole officer arrived to Elizabeth's house for a surprise inspection. Upon arriving, this parole officer noted a very foul stench coming from the home and was immediately met with a very angry Elizabeth, who began yelling obscenities at her and told her that she could not enter without a warrant. Of course, your parole officer does not need a warrant to search your home, especially when that is terms of your sentencing. Throughout the entire visit, Elizabeth was incredibly hateful and said several racist and derogatory remarks to this officer. Once the probation officer entered the first floor of the home, he noticed several malnourished cats and began taking photos. At this point, Elizabeth became very violent and started trying to grab the phone. The officer then continued to the second floor where he spotted a group of underweight dogs. Now, when the officer tried to proceed up that staircase, Elizabeth shoved her. While the officer was able to grab the railing to prevent herself from falling, he twisted her back and had to seek medical care later on that day. The findings of this search prompted the police and animal investigators to return to the home later that day. They found 7 dogs, which included 3 puppies, 1 cat, 2 guinea pigs, and 2 rabbits living in cramped, fly-infested quarters with no air conditioning, while temperatures were soaring to the mid-90s. Prosecutors also said that they turned up 2 turtles and 2 betta fish living in a filthy tank in her bathtub. Elizabeth was charged with attempted assault of a police officer, attempted assault as a hate crime, 2 counts of first-degree assault, attempted assault, violating a court-ordered ban against possessing pets, 26 counts of failure to provide food and drink to an impounded animal. With all of this being said, she could have served up to 7 years in prison, but she only was sentenced to 6 months. Mind you, that's only 6 months for animal abuse / neglect and harming an officer. And just as a reminder, while Elizabeth's father passed away shortly after that first raid, her elderly mother still lived in the home during this second raid too. As if 2 back-to-back offenses was not enough, on November 26th of 2021, a Adult Protective Services employee arrived to the home to perform a wellness check on Elizabeth's mother and noticed that the home was covered in fecal matter and urine. The authorities were notified once more, and they discovered cats, dogs, turtles, guinea pigs, and rabbits living in the home. Many of these animals were underweight. So later on that day, animal welfare groups arrived yet again and removed 29 animals from the home. Unfortunately, several of the animals were incredibly fearful and were unable to be captured. Thankfully, cops obtained a search warrant and they were able to return on December 22nd to remove the remainder of those animals from the home. Elizabeth's mother was removed from the home during this raid and, to my knowledge, is still in the care of Adult Protective Services. Now, for some reason, I could not find anything online regarding jail time or any remarks regarding sentencing for this third offense. Now, let's jump ahead to May 2024. Elizabeth Grant was caught with owning and neglecting animals once again.
I started stumbling over my words in this clip, but what I was trying to say is that the home was in such disrepair that they had to use a ladder to get to the second floor.
The first floor ceiling was rotting and peeling away due to fluid damage. Once again, the ammonia levels in the home were so high, the animal rescue groups and police had to wear respirators and protective gear. Amongst the trash, feces, fur, and urine, a deceased cat was found deceased under the coffee table in the home. 2 more cats were also found deceased during this search. The home was infested with flies and there were no clean water sources available to any of the animals in the home. Not only was the home disgusting, but as you can tell in these photos, the animals were also covered in fecal matter and urine. 26 dogs and 12 cats were removed from the home by the ASPCA. Many of these animals had matted fur, were underweight, had open wounds, and untreated medical conditions. Her court date was set for September 27th of 2024, and she could have received up to 2 more years in prison. Unfortunately, I could not find any follow-up articles regarding her sentencing, so I'm not sure if she received those 2 years or not. But I do believe that she is currently in jail based on my research. All of this being said, Elizabeth Grant has harmed 151 animals between 2016 and 2024, and that's just what we know about. Through every hearing, Elizabeth has attempted to maintain her innocence and denies causing any suffering to these animals. On her Facebook, she has gone as far as to claim that she was running a free hospice shelter out of her home and believes that taking care of animals is her calling in life. While these statements are concerning, the most alarming thing to me is that Elizabeth's followers on Facebook support her actions even after she's been found guilty. You see, Elizabeth Grant is a fierce believer in the no-kill movement, and ever since that first raid back in 2016, she has publicly denounced the ASPCA and accused them falsely of several crimes. Elizabeth has been exceptionally critical of them for euthanizing several of her pets who were described as suffering after that initial raid. And many have come out to support her, stating that at least Elizabeth tried to save these animals. She was not a hospice rescue, and if you visit her Facebook page, even she has acknowledged that she has cared for these dogs and cats their entire life, many of which were seniors at the time of that first raid in 2016. She did not rescue these animals in poor, sad conditions. They became like that in her care. It is frustrating to read and research about this case because so many animals had to suffer, and I do not understand why Elizabeth did not face more jail time, especially with the amount of time she reoffended after that first crime was committed back in 2016. Not to mention the strain that each violation had on local rescue resources and police. Can you even fathom the amount of money spent by these rescues on vet bills for these animals after they were removed from her care? Thankfully, there are organizations out there who continue to show up day after day, raid after raid, cleaning up the aftermath of people like Elizabeth Grant. But we shouldn't need so many after-the-fact heroes. What we need is prevention, real accountability, and consequences that actually mean something. Most of the animals from the 2024 raid have been placed into loving, good homes, and that's one bright spot in all of this. But I would be lying if I said that I wasn't fearful for the future. And if history tells us anything, it's that when Elizabeth is released, he will probably reoffend. If this case made you as angry as it made me, please consider turning that anger into some goodness. Share this video, talk about this case, and maybe even reach out to your local lawmakers and ask for stronger protections for the animals in your state. All of that being said, don't forget to join me over on my Discord server if you want to talk deeper into these cases, or if you just want to yell into the void like me about the injustice of it all. And catch me on TikTok for more bite-sized stories and updates in between uploads. I'll be back soon with another story, but until then, hug your pets, support your local animal shelter, and never let "at least she tried" be an excuse for animal cruelty and neglect. See you next time. Stay kind and stay safe.